What is up, Internet? I am here with Stephen Brewer and possible Superintendent of DeKalb County Schools, Heath Kirby. Keith, how are you, buddy?
Doing good, man. How are y'all doing today?
Doing good, buddy. I appreciate you hopping on. This is very cool for me. Stephen, how you been, brother?
Good, man. You guys doing all right?
Doing great, man. I appreciate you coming up.
Appreciate y'all having me on.
This is very cool for me. And I'll go ahead and we're going to start a little heavy on it in a good way. It's a good question. Would you consider yourself a politician? It's good, right off.
When we started this venture journey that we're on, we got to go through a process of going through nomination committees and things like that. So me not having a political background at all was something that I thought would be good for what I do, because all I really know how to do is run schools and be part of a school. So I'm not a politician. If you really want to know how I feel about things, you just have to ask me, as long as it's the right situation, as long as it pertains to what we're trying to do. But no, I mean, we just try to do what we think's right for what I know how to do, and that's run schools. So I would say no, absolutely not.
Not
but
a career
you have to
politician.
get in and do the politics of it, which is meeting people and talking to people about issues, both sides of issue, controversial issues, or things that have happened to people within the last few years. They want to know, well, how would you handle this situation? And that's the politics part that you have to learn for me. So I just try to relate it back to what I know how to do and have board policy and school policy. And that's really what I know, and being part of it. I mean, my parents were educators. My stepmother, my mother, my father, my brother, my stepsister, and my wife. So, I mean, I've been in a school since I've been in this world. So
That's very cool. Now, I've met your wife a few times, and she is a very sweet lady. She's always been very polite to me. Where does she teach at?
Actually, she's working out of the district this time. She's parental engagement specialist for DeKalb County. She has a grant writer for DeKalb County. She deals with a lot of things through the federal programs, Indian Ed, anything the federal government under Dr. Harrison in our district office, she has her hands in. So a lot of hats, and that's what it takes. A lot of people having various roles.
You do got to have people that are watching your back, helping you out. And there's been times in my life where I've done things and I thought, man, I can do everything. I can do all of it, because I'm going to do all of it by myself. I'm going to do it because ain't nobody going to do it like I do it. No, it's not possible. You'll run yourself ragged. It's good that you have a great team around you. So when you did decide, hey, I'm going to run for superintendent, I'm going to do that. What was that conversation like with your wife? What brought y'all to that point to where you said, I'm going to try to do that?
Well, we had, just tossed the idea around for 6 or 8 months. And it got down to the point that I felt like it would be a good opportunity for me at this time in my career. I have 28 years in. Been an administrator since 2009. All of those have been in DeKalb County as an administrator. I did work in Jackson County for 8 or 9 years as head football coach at Pisgah High School and assistant coach over there. Mr. Sharoni gave me a shot at being a teacher over there. Back when you apply for jobs, there'd be 60 people wanting the same job. Now we're having a hard time finding a kindergarten teacher at this point at Sylvania. So times are very different, but I've been an administrator in this district the whole time. I've not known anything else. So I feel like when we started making my decision, that gave me an opportunity to give knowledge about DeKalb County schools and Jackson County too, because the school systems parallel each other in a lot of ways, even though there are differences. But I think that and the opportunity of it, we haven't. Dr. Barnett ran unopposed in 2020, and so we haven't had an elected superintendent since 16, where we had 2 different candidates running at that time. So I just felt like it was a good opportunity, and we really weren't. I was not prepared for the workload of being a principal at a school and running for office. It's pretty challenging, especially during football season. We had about 2,500 people or more up here last night with a great win. Just get a little shout out to Coach Van and everybody for the job they did at school and the football team this week. But I think that's really what pushed me to do it. It was my administrative career solely in DeKalb County, and felt like I knew what our challenges would be and our successes.
Awesome.
I know, we have a lot of successes in this school system, and they need to be. We also have a lot of challenges, as all school systems do. So.
That being said, you mentioned the teachers. Why do you think it's so hard to find teachers right now?
I think, golly, going back there, I could go on. We could sit here for several hours.
We've
talking.
got a full hour, and if you go over, that's fine, brother. You
Well,
touch
I'm gonna
base on
say
anything
this:
you want.
school is challenging. Public school is challenging. When you go into the workload side of it, where you have a lot of accountability, school report card accountability, state testing accountability, is a lot different than it used to be. You get graded every year on your school report card based on attendance, performance, graduation rate, things like that. And COVID really knocked the people that could retire. That kind of ran a lot of them out, and then it kept a lot of people from going into it. We would get 4 or 5 student teachers a year. Now we have 1 or 2 a year. And it's just challenging the workload and the preparation. That's why it's important for teachers to have that prep time and not have time where they're pulled around a little bit. But I think a lot of it has to do with the workload, and pay has a lot to do with it. I know people always will say, well, teachers don't work in the summer. They do, because I'll have teachers up here right after the 4th of July. They'll be in those classrooms getting prepared for the upcoming year. And it's a challenge, but I hope the state is trending in the right direction with pay, to get it up to where other states are. We have a good starting pay in Alabama, but our pay as it goes through is not as great as it is. They've done some things for math and science and special ed teachers where they're targeting those because they were hard to find. Now it's trickling down into the elementary. We would have 30 or 40 applicants for one kindergarten job 5 years ago.
It's just different now.
Yeah, it's just totally different. We may have 10 brand new teachers now. We may have some people that want to transfer in. I'm fortunate. Sylvania's fortunate to have a lot of great people, produce a lot of teachers that want to come back to Sylvania. But district wide, it's a challenge to find and keep teachers.
Awesome, man. I dig it. So Kimberly Ann Munson-Goza is super happy that you're on here. Becky Crawford says she loves Heath Kirby. He's the best person for the job, honest through and through. We told people to ask some questions. Kimberly said she prays to God that you do win. She said she has a question. We're waiting on that.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you actually go to school at?
During my time, my dad was a head football coach. He coached at Geraldine, and actually did a little stint in Dade County, and came back to Sylvania as a head football coach. So I went through my elementary years here at Sylvania, where John and I both were up to 5th grade. And then my dad took the head football coach position at Valley Head, and my brother and I went down there. I think my first year was 6th grade. So went through there. Dad was a successful coach, state championship winning coach at Valley Head, and my mother moved to Auburn, got a position at Auburn. So I kind of followed her to Auburn and spent some time in Auburn, and got a degree from the University of Alabama and a degree from Jacksonville State. I was telling somebody the other day, I just had a few more schools, so of course, to have some degrees, but I think I'm done with that first time being. But so I know this community very well, and know my dad coached at Geraldine. My mom taught at Ider and Valley Head, and my wife's family's from the south end of the county, and she was in school down there around Geraldine, or at Crossville. Sorry. But her folks are from Geraldine, and her dad. And so I've kind of reached all over the county, and my dad, he was the first of his family to go to college. He went to Troy State. And so he had 8 brothers and 1 sister. And so education became important for him because he understood what it was like, because they grew up very poor. And so we've just kind of been settled in. And I did, like I said, I went to Pisgah right out of the gate and was able to come back to Valley Head. And because I wanted to be an administrator, I knew I might have an opportunity at Valley Head to be an administrator. So being an administrator the whole time in DeKalb County, I think is very important to what I'm trying to do at this point.
So the entire time you've been in administration, you've said, I'm making sure, so I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
You have the whole time you've been in administration work, you've been in DeKalb County.
Yes, I started in 2000. Football season of 2009 was my last team in 2009 as head coach there. And then I was fortunate enough in February of 2010 to become the assistant principal. And it was that was invaluable for me. Which you jump forward a lot quicker now because of turnover to administration. I was able to be an administrator for 8 years. Mr. Monroe was my boss down there, Bill Monroe. And so I was able to do that the whole time at Valley Head. And then when he retired, I became the principal at Valley Head in 2018, 19. And COVID kind of was part of 2020. So right after the kind of COVID fade, I had an opportunity to come to Sylvania. It was great. Loved my time at Valley Head. And then, of course, I've been starting on this is my third year at Sylvania. So, yeah, the whole time we've been
13, 14 years of experience.
Yeah. And it's unique. The county rural school system that is Title I funded is very different than other school systems where city schools, and not that they wouldn't have the same challenges, but in our district is so diverse from south to north. The south end of the county is very different than the north end of the county. And we had a lot of that at Valley Head where we were very diverse, Hispanic down there. And I learned a lot about that.
Love the Hispanic community.
Absolutely. Coming from Jackson County where they didn't have that. And when I got to Valley Head, that was when the rise 05, 06, we had a lot of influx of folks coming in, hunting jobs and things like that. And that's when it kind of blew up. Hispanic culture came in, and that was very different for me. But I got to learn that firsthand as the population became more diverse, which I think was is extraordinary. Learning about different cultures and things like that. Especially we were about 20-25% at Valley Head or so. But it's been a great experience for me.
One thing I've seen in the Hispanic community is they're all polite. They're all very polite, and even more important than that, even if they were mean to me, and they're not ever, I would still be grateful for the food. The food is delicious.
Absolutely.
Man.
We could come to if you come up to our soccer games, we do have a little soccer team up here, been somewhat successful, and
congratulations.
they have the best concession stands by far, because
awesome.
they will actually come. People will come stop in and not stay for the soccer game.
No, they eat, bro.
To get some tacos.
So it's kind of a good question, kind of for where we are, I think. And no one's asked this yet. I got a question I'm going to ask Mr. Brewer. You're a educator, so you kind of be thinking and see if you've got something in your pocket. And if you do, I'll get you in just a second too. So with where we are, the way the kind of the world is, there is a lot of bullying in schools and stuff. It doesn't seem that there's as much Jesus in the schools today. Where are you at as far as that goes?
Well, I mean, we live in a time where it's so easy. Bullying, back when I was in school, it was taking your lunch money.
Yeah.
Or on the school bus. It was person to person. And now it's so easy to pick up a phone or a keyboard and do those things. And a lot of that will happen off campus.
Yeah.
And it will come on campus, whether it's over the weekend with Snapchat or TikTok or those things like that. It's unbelievable when you get to digging into how easy it is, and it makes it very challenging. And what we try to do is when we get that is confront it as best we can, straightforward. Now, that doesn't mean that we do it perfect every time, but when you get something that doesn't happen on campus and it spills in, then you have to be able to communicate that back to the parent and let them know that, hey, this is happening. It might not be at school, but inevitably it will cause fights or disruptions or just bad culture at your school. So it is very challenging.
I think it has to start at home a little bit. If your kids are bullying, your kids are being rude, you need to nip it in the bud. You got to whoop them on the back behind a little bit, but that's not how we act.
I don't want to get in that. We do have it in the policy, but I will say teaching people to be nice to one another
That's awesome.
is really where it boils down to. And we if we do that, and if we're just doing the right thing, a lot of that will take care of itself. But it's a very challenging situation when you bring smart cell phones and all that stuff into it. So
I agree. 1 second. You got some good stuff on here. Kimberly asked, could you stand up for kids who do have genetic diseases that would not get bad grades in PE? Is that something you can do?
We have we just have to find alternative ways for them to be able to do those things. And we have situations at school right now where we have to find alternatives for disabled students to be able to have PE. You just have to work closely with the parents to find out what that child can do. And it may not be, if they can't, may not be just being physically active. If they're not able to do that, then it may be something else where they learn about sports or they learn about this.
I gotcha.
Getting them in sports, we're sitting at a platform right here where you don't have to be a athlete to be able to broadcast sports. You were at the ball game
Correct.
last night, right?
Well, not me.
Or
but-
somebody was broadcasting from you. So, because I saw one of our parents couldn't get it on NFHS, and they were like, "Hey, I'm watching on the grapevine," and of course, NFHS, you have to pay for that platform. But
Are you saying the grapevine's free?
I don't know if it's free or not. I'm not asking.
It is. Go ahead, brother. We
So, and
listen.
then you get into the sports part of it. Have to be careful broadcasting because Alabama High School Athletic Association, you can't broadcast the whole game unless you pay for it. But anyway, let's go back to the question. But we have to find alternative ways for kids to be able to participate in everything. And if they can't do physically, then we have to find different avenues for them to be able to do it.
I know she liked the answer because she said she's homeschooling now because she didn't want her son to fail. With a lot of people going to homeschool, is there a plan to bring people, like not bring people? You don't want to say bring people back to like the church because it's not a church, it's a school. But is there a plan to? Is there anything kind of that y'all would think you could do to bring people back to the school? Or
I don't be the biggest challenge because homeschool virtual became we all know that and 3 years ago. We tried to do the best we could for 3 months of reaching out and being able to teach the kids online. But if a parent chooses to pull them for whatever reason, maybe it's health or church or whatever, the biggest issue would be the transition socially back in, and whatever curriculum the parent was using to teach is going to be very different probably than what we have. Because I'll just give you an example. Our reading program, K3, has to be scientifically based. So the state has to approve that. We have to be trained in it, which is very challenging. I already talked about our teachers getting pulled out of classes to be trained. So the curriculum itself and the social aspect is very challenging. And I think when you take children that are in the home every day, all day, and then they go back in the classroom of 18 students, and you have students of all different cultures, and they're not used to that bombardment of interactions, very challenging. We have to be very, very real about that being a real goal about getting those folks included back into it. As far as a plan, I think it's individually based of the student. We don't know why they were homeschooled. We don't know, and hope the parent can give us as much information as possible when it comes back. But we do have to screen them. If a student comes in as an 8-year-old, we have to screen them and see their reading level. Of course, we're going to put them age appropriate 99% of the time. But if there's a learning gap, that's the part that I was talking about the curriculum. Our reading curriculum is very challenging because of the Literacy Act. The Literacy Act is a state law that they have to be on grade level by grade 3. So those are the two main challenges I feel, curriculum and I really think the social aspect is very challenging for homeschool students. But we have 1, 2, 3, 4. If you watched that kickoff return last night, first, that's a homeschool student right there going. So
that's cool. I like that.
So that was a law that was, if you remember Tim Tebow, that took fire all over the nation. Golly, how long was Tim Tebow? 2008, 9, 10.
Tebow was homeschooled?
Tebow's homeschool.
Oh, son, that's cool.
So I want every student that lives in Sylvania or anywhere, if I become superintendent in DeKalb County, to want to come in to this public school system. But I also understand that that's not.
But they don't have to be in that school system to play sports.
They do not. But
Touch
they do.
on that. Touch on it just for people that don't know, because I didn't know that.
They don't have to do that. They can, but they do have to be enrolled at Sylvania. They do have to live in the school district of Sylvania. They have to be they have to have 2 elective classes on campus. They can't, you can't do, you have to come for 2 electives, and then you have to provide a transcript and records of grades, especially when they get to the 9th grade. When you start earning credits, the state has to see. So I'll have to take, for example, your child's transcript in the 9th grade, you have to print it and bring me their grades where you're providing your homeschool curriculum, and I have to submit that through the state, and they will have to make a ruling on eligibility. You do have to live in the school district, that like Sylvania bus route. You do have to live there to be able to play sports at Sylvania. That's called the Tim Tebow rule. So all over the state. But like I said, I mean, there's a different path for everybody. I know you said you don't mind me saying your children are homeschooled.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say this: it is important. I live and breathe public education. My family were public educators, but I'm also, for what the parents think's right. So, there's a place for everybody, I think. But on public school, that's just where my heart lies.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, what's been once you started running for superintendent? We'll skip that one for now. What's been your favorite thing that you've accomplished as an administrator?
Wow, we
got good ones today.
We did a thing back right when I started being an administrator. We were able to do some alternative scheduling at Valley Head. I love that aspect of it. It's high school, even though Mr. Monroe and I, was just 2 of us, and we got about 500 kids down there. We were able to do some things with some alternative scheduling down there, and do some things with our students that weren't normal, some music and things like that, art, things like that way back, which that's one of the things I've been talking about. We have schools in our county that may have band and some schools that don't.
Yeah.
We may have an art teacher where we're funded here, but don't have the funding at another school. Or we may have some facilities that are different at other schools. Now that we talk about building facilities, that it's a different animal, but that's one of the things, talking about my One DeKalb platform, is if we have an opportunity of funding it at one school, I believe we should look into the ways to fund it at all schools. So if we have an art teacher, say at Crossville, then we need to have art teacher. We do bring an art teacher in at Sylvania, but it is a person that just comes in and teaches art. It's not a certified art teacher.
Yeah.
So that's different, where you have a art education degree, but those are hard to find. But that's one of the things that's important. And looking at those things, one of my favorite things I've done is we had zero, when I became an administrator and at Valley Head, we had zero technology, and now technology is plentiful. But when we found the resources to be able to bring those new things in was one of the most, our teachers had a computer and an email and no projectors and none of the things like that. And we were able to really update our things at Sylvania since I've been there with our Promethean panels and things like that. Fortunate to have some federal funding to be able to do that. But that's one of the most, and that was very different at every school. You may have one school that had interactive displays everywhere, and one school that had zero.
They got a chalkboard.
They had a chalkboard. And so chalkboards are great. Now, we pulled some off the wall this year that I probably wrote on in 1980. So, but that's one of the most fun things I've done. And I think being part of the teacher culture because that's what I lived growing up. That's been one of my favorite things to be as an administrator. That was very different when you're becoming a peer to a supervisor.
Oh yeah, he's mean. No, he's not. No, it's just now we gotta listen.
So, but those things, you get rewarded every day by being a principal, hugs and things like that. But that's probably my favorite part.
I got
Seeing
you.
those
Oh,
smiles every day. So
I like it. Mr. Brewer, do you have any questions as an educator? Do you have anything?
Well, I had always thought about, it seems like you mentioned the curriculum, right?
Yeah.
So like where you sit, you're kind of on the inside, right? You're on the inside, you're at the administrative level, at the school system level. As a parent, my kids go to they're in the Fort Payne school system. Sure. It almost seems like over the last maybe 20 years, say 15, 20 years, things have become more.
Lean in a hair, Stephen. Lean in just a
lean in a little bit.
Yep.
Things seem to have gotten a little more clandestine, as far as what goes on the other side, on that administrative side of the fence.
Right.
And as a parent, it's a bit frustrating sometimes. It seems like there's a dark curtain pulled down called FERPA.
Right.
FERPA drops down, and Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, and it becomes what happens at school stays at school. We're not allowed to tell you this, we're not allowed to tell you that. How much of curriculum planning are parents allowed to know about? I'm curious about that.
I'll go back to what we were talking about, and I went through some PD or some professional learning Thursday on the Numeracy Act. I don't know if you know a lot about the Numeracy Act. So,
not me.
A Literacy Act was something that the legislature passed a few years ago. So it says everybody's going to be reading on grade level by grade 3.
You're on the Alabama Grapevine. 1 minute, please.
So when you do that, when they pass those laws like that, they're mandates that are not, that don't have funding. Okay. So, but they pass rules back. So your rules would say, okay, well, this
is federal level mandate,
right?
This
state level mandate, state level mandate, okay. Which they have to be the same. So when they passed those laws, then they said that the reading curriculums had to be scientifically based. Well, then boom, you have 4 textbook companies that will come in and say, well, this one is scientifically based, this one's scientifically based. And when it gets time for us to adopt a language program for K3, then the state says, here you go. So
the state selects. So
the state says, here's you 4 that pass our,
okay.
And then they will give them to the districts. The districts have very little time to bring those down. And then the worst part to me, and our teachers work so hard, is once they select that and give it there, they have about a month to flip through all of that material and get ready to teach school. So back to your question, what the parents get is what the parents get based on what the state gives us and based what the district selects
from that limited
amount. So the Numeracy Act is going to be coming here very quickly. That says proficiency for math by grade 5. So they're going to support by hiring these coaches and all these things, which is great help. But then the curriculum will nobody will know at that point what scientifically based mathematics will look like at that point.
So you really don't really have any input whatsoever until it comes to you from the state. Here's what's been approved. Select one.
And then, the uproar of 15 years ago where everybody was like Common Core. Well, that was a set of standards where nationally, the governors of the states decided they wanted a common language for everybody in math. So if you move from Alabama to Wyoming, you got the same language in math. That concept is awesome.
Yes.
But it became politicized where, you're teaching math a different way. Well, if you look at our math scores, 33rd in the world or whatever it is, these other countries are doing math not the way my parents were taught, or where you memorization in it, but it was more concept when you needed more to know the concepts. So all that Common Core, if you remember the uproar, it all trickled down in the schools, and we got new math books in 2011, 12, and then Common Core's evil. Common Core is evil. It's the president's fault. And actually it was a governor's initiative. And if I don't want to step on, I'm not a politician, so I'm just going to say, when you get politicians deciding what you get and what your standards are, and a lot of them never put their foot inside a school door, you're going to get the things like you talk about. Here's the good part, though. Here's the good part. You have DeKalb County is the largest employer. DeKalb County is the largest employer in DeKalb County, and you have the best people that are trying to put that curriculum on that desk every day in their best possible. The limited amount of time that they get to prepare for that is where the trouble is. So get the curriculum. We're going through that right now. Our coaches and our things are doing a great job of trying to get that to the teachers, but they get paid 188 days and they're trying to do it on their off days in the summer. It's just very challenging. And that comes from the top down. Do not think that it does not come from the top down. We just get handed it. And the fight is finding that time that's unencumbered for teachers to be able to put it on paper and get it to the kids.
That's awesome. Good question, Mr. Brewer. I'm gonna return this.
Well, that's one of those things we could sit here. I mean,
that could go a long
people
time.
Probably not going to tune in for that long.
Right.
Anytime you have a question, feel free to go ahead. I'm gonna see if I think we had a phone call in because I don't know this phone number anyway. But if not, we'll hang up. We're gonna find out. Hey, this is Sam with the Alabama Grapevine. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are y'all?
Doing great, man. Hey, go ahead.
I just had a question for Mr. Kirby. I understand that when you were a principal of Sylvania, I'm sorry, when Mr. King was a principal of Sylvania, the score, on the yearly state report card for Sylvania, it was they scored an 88, and this past year when you were a principal, it was an 82, and I was just wondering, like, what would you say to people who who are on the fence? You know, they want to vote for you, they want the other guy. What would you say to that?
So when you talk about school report card, I mentioned that earlier. Things come from the previous year, and so when we inherited graduation rate, and we inherited so documentation for graduation rate on that year was probably one of the main reasons, and attendance was one of the main reasons that our scores went down. And I'm not going to blame anybody other than the fact that it was very challenging. Let me give you a good example of your attendance comes from chronic absenteeism. So going through COVID, you had multiple ways to be out, and they gave us some COVID excuses. But just so you know, if you're chronically absent 18 days or more, then it counts against your student report card. So just by board policy, we give 8 excuses a year, and they're free. So if you just took a long weekend and Monday and Friday, there's 2 parent notes right there. So part of that was very tied to our attendance, and even last year our attendance was not very good because that pulling back from COVID has been one of the hardest things for all our schools to do. The portion of attendance and graduation rate where you lost kids, just they didn't give you any documentation why they didn't come back to school or things like that. That was one of the things that hurt our report card during that time. Going back to attendance, it's easier for you to justify attendance nowadays based on individual education plans or health reasons or things like that. But the state does not care. It doesn't matter if your student has been out 18 days and make it 19 to make you chronically absent, then it doesn't matter if they bring a doctor's note every day. So, but I do know this, our academic growth during that year was 98.06%. So let me give you a little bit about academic growth. That's where you take your, how you scored on a standardized test from one year to the next. It will show how much you grow. And that's where really the rubber meets the road for your kids. There's so many other factors that will go in, college and career preparedness, and that will determine graduation in 2028. And I can go into that a little bit, but if you're not, everybody is expected to have a college and career readiness credential on their check box when they graduate. So if you go in the military, there's one.
Yeah.
If you benchmark on the ACT, there's one. If you take a college class, there's one. If you get a credential through career tech department, ag, home ec, or you go to tech school and get a career, there's another way of checking that. And there's another way of getting it if you take the standardized test. It's called work keys. So a lot of police stations, if you go to the academy, they expect you to have work keys.
We deal with that a lot.
Right. So our CCR rate at Sylvania last year our federal rate was 98%.
Awesome.
So we're preparing kids, but the state report card is and I'm telling you where the state report card really hurts for schools like Crossville Middle, Crossville Elementary. We have that are standalone schools. Crossville Elementary is given a report card on their own. Crossville Middle is getting a report card on their own. Crossville High School is getting a report card on their own. Sylvania and Plainview and Ider, Valley Head, they're giving a report card for everybody. So we have ACAP all the way up. We have another opportunity to improve our scores for pre-ACT. We have another opportunity to improve our score for ACT career tech credentialing, which is one of the most awesome things for us to increase our graduation, or not our graduation rate, but our school report card. These South End schools, because they just have one shot. They just have proficiency alone, and that's when it really, because they're compared. That's like compared apples and oranges. A K-12 school for a middle school is totally different. So I see you see a big number, 88 to 82. I see the wins inside that, but we fight things like attendance and graduation rate. I fought graduation rate a lot at Valley Head because you would have 35 seniors.
Yeah.
Beginning the school year. Well, it starts in the 9th grade and they have to go through that cohort together. So if you don't document a kid leaves in the 10th grade, if you don't document them where they're going, that'll count against you 3 years later.
Yeah.
So we have, so if you had 35 seniors and you have 3 kids that don't make it, then your graduation rate can, so we know very well about that. So I understand this question. I appreciate that, because that's something a lot of folks, when they see state report card, they just say, hey, my school's a B, my school's a C. And if you get to break that into the subcomponents, there's a lot that goes into that. Academic growth portion is a huge amount, but it can knock you down by your attendance and your graduation rate. I mean, it doesn't take much of that to knock you down. So, but it is a challenge. That's a federal mandate. So we have to be, that report card has to go to the federal government and say, because we're a Title I school, that means our poverty rate is over 50%. So that's why we have that report card. And if the federal government's giving you $20 million, pushing in however much it is, then they're going to make you accountable. They're going to have some numbers that you got to go by. So
I want that $20 million.
Yeah. Well, we're fortunate now. So I'm going to tell you, Sylvania's fortunate to have some good title funds coming in, but that comes with a double-edged sword. So I will say that there's a lot that goes into it for sure.
Now, I do want to say that was not my question. I don't know who that was that called in. That was a hard question.
That is
but,
good. That's a good.
But as a tip of the hat to you, I have asked, and not that you're a politician, I'm not lumping you in with that. It's important that I say what I'm going to say. I've asked a lot of politicians to come on. I've asked a lot of people to come on. I've had some good guests, but very good guests. But I've asked a lot of people to come on that, and a lot of them, not a lot of them say no. We've had more than a few say no because I think maybe some people get nervous about getting hard questions. That was a hard question. Is the fact that you came on here and you didn't get. I know your wife barely. I know you. We've never first time we've ever met. Correct.
Right. Walking in here.
Correct. First time we've ever met.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Sure. Now I don't mean I know her barely. I mean like we've never broke bread. We've never had a. We say hello when we see each other because we're polite. We don't hang out all the time, right? We didn't send you a whole bunch of questions to prepare for. There was nothing sent to you like, hey, this is it. Prep for it. You showed up. Son, and there's something to be said for that, and that's awesome to me.
Well,
and I tip my hat to you for that.
I'm going to say this about improvisation. I'm going to go back to sports.
Go.
When you lived football, or even I was helping with basketball in Jackson County, you have to be able to deal with things on the fly. And I'm absolutely was not going to be dishonest with you. I mean, coming on, taking calls from people, when you're a leader to school, not everybody's going to agree with what you do, even down to but I will say this, and I was like, look, somebody's going to call in because their kid came in the office or whatever. I said, well, just deal with it when they call, right? But I will say this, if you can, anybody that knows me or knows what kind of school I do run, if they need to know what's going on, all they got to do is come in and say, hey, I need to talk to you, because that door is always open. And we were talking about, my wife and I were talking about getting back with emails and stuff today about missing emails or whatever. And that happens daily when you get the bombardment of text and emails. But I always will tell my secretaries or whatever, tell them to come to the school, because I'm always going to make time for somebody to come in. And that's improv 101 right there. I mean, if you don't know what they're going to want to talk to you about. So I'm always going to let you know what I think and what we're going to do. So
I think debate and then just discussion in general is a kind of a lost art form. We've got about 15, 16 minutes left. I ain't going to kill your day and nothing, but I think that's a lost form. I think that's something people should be experienced in, because like, how are you going to get your point across if you can't have a conversation? Jenny Mann said, as a parent and alumni of Ider High School, I love my community and my school and am involved in our school's growth and betterment. Hey, with that being said, this past year, the school board approved for Henninger to be a feeder school for Ider and Sylvania, therefore giving students an option to choose where to further their high school education. Hers cut off, but it goes on to say, if elected as superintendent, do you intend to continue to support this relationship as Henninger being a feeder school and giving parents and students, I believe, the opportunity to still choose?
I'm going to say this a little bit about that. The historic bus routes don't say that it's a feeder school. The rule was to mirror what the Alabama High School Athletic Association is doing. Now that's going to ruffle that alone ruffle feathers with Sylvania folks. And Ider folks are glad to be able for folks to choose, folks being the parents, to choose where you go. So saying that to say this, the Alabama High School Athletic Association lets you choose one move in a sub-varsity move. So if you are at Sylvania or Fife or wherever, and you want to go play sub-varsity at somewhere else.
Just playing under the varsity level.
Sub-varsity. Okay. That's B team basketball or down.
Okay.
Or junior high football. And that is the nature of the rule. The feeder pattern is where it gets shaky and where the language wasn't clear from. That's where my reservation is. So it's got to be shored up through policy of how we do that, because the state, when we got the notice that was going to happen, then there was no guidance for what we needed to do. The state just says, well, that's what your superintendent said. I said, well, that's fine. but they said, well, I said, I know what the state policy says. You can pick. So if a 7th grader wants to go play junior high football from Henniger, because Henniger doesn't provide junior high football.
Yeah.
So that was the nature of the rule. The logistics that support feeder patterns not there because the bus routes didn't change. So that's the difference, and that's where the gray area is that I think needs to be shored up. These students have choices now through the AHSAA that they have never had. If you notice, everything trickles down. If you watch college football and you see the parity in college football, everybody just kind of looks at me crazy. I said, you wait in a few years when they started transfer ruling, it will trickle down in the AHSAA. And within 1 year, this transfer rule was allowed to happen. Now, it doesn't happen in the varsity level without a move or a year's where you like the old sit out rule. But I think as superintendent, that policy has to be shored up where the language of feeder pattern is not there, because a feeder pattern is where bus districts go in a certain way, like bus routes go a certain way.
Yeah. How are you just going to go pick up that kid?
Right. So those things didn't change. Those bus routes didn't change. I support if a student, and I've had best friends that have left my football team to take their kids to Fort Payne. Best friends. Not one time did I ever say, you know, you're not my friend anymore, because I was a coach at the time, and that player, so a few players like that would have been great players and went to Fort Payne and were good players, great players. So if that's the parent's choice, there's no way that I, as a superintendent, I'm gonna support what the parent wants to do.
Yeah.
As long as our language and our policy, because when that policy was put through, there was no guidance. And so I'm having to call state to find out if we're doing things the right way. Because what it takes is now you have to declare eligibility, even though you're still living within, because our entire bus route for Sylvania encompasses Henniger still, and that did not change. So that language, and according to the state of Alabama, did not change, and according to the AHSAA. But the policy has to be shored up to where we don't do different things based on what the AHSAA says and based on what the policy says. So if they choose to go to either, they already have that choice to be able to do that now with picking. But the feeder pattern is where that it's not, the wording's not correct, because if you turn in the 9th grade in Henniger and ride a bus, you'll go to Sylvania. That's the way Mr. Ashley in the transportation department says it. If you live in the Henniger district in the 9th grade and want to go to Ider, you have to get in a car and go.
Yeah.
Because that bus,
because the bus don't go that. I get that.
So that's where the feeder pattern is not.
If you want your kids, I think if you're going to pick where your kid lives, you might have to be open to taking them to school.
Right.
Well, so that doesn't sound crazy to me.
And it's not. And then we have
that don't sound crazy.
We have kids that come to Sylvania that lives in Fife, Pine Ridge, Valley Head, and every school does.
Yeah.
Every school does. So here's what I do support. I support parent choice to be able, as long as that it follows the sports guidelines with the AHSAA and the policy mirrors that. So that's and so kids going between Henniger, Sylvania, and Ider's been going on since the beginning of time.
Forever.
So,
Jenny said, thank you for your answer.
yes, ma'am.
Do you have anything, boss?
I think that pretty well covered what I was talking about earlier. It's just
I got you.
the curriculum idea. Just to touch on that briefly, because it's like you said, that could go for days.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you feel like, and I'm trying, the question that I wanted to ask, I feel like it's too loaded, so I don't think I want to go there. I don't want to put you on the spot with that. But I remember, like, pre-Department of Education, seemed like we as a nation seemed to do a little bit better.
Right.
The school system. And then suddenly there was this thick influx of bureaucracy that happened when the Department of Ed was created.
Yep.
And I think
that's where the money comes from.
Yeah.
Too, right?
And you talked earlier about that double-edged sword of
Yeah.
these millions of dollars coming in, but it comes at a price.
Right.
And the price is we own you.
Right.
To an extent. Right. And you were just saying you're limited. By the time it filters from federal level, state level down to the actual school district, you have very little choice, don't you? I mean,
Yeah.
when you say, So, I mean, what I'm curious about is not necessarily just the adoption of the curriculum, but I really feel like there's an agenda at play. There's a political agenda that's been bleeding into the school system for a while.
Sure.
Right. And, what do we as parents, I like what you said earlier, which is as long as it fits within guidelines and as long as anyone wants to come talk about it, you'll be transparent enough to talk about that. I think that's admirable, to say the least. But I mean, you understand what I'm saying? There's a frustration from a parent level is, what do you put in my kids' heads during that period of time where you're shrouded under FERPA and I'm not really allowed to know what goes on?
Right.
Does that make sense?
I'll say this too. Our governor takes everything out of our hands when it comes to policy because she's the president of the state board, right? So she's the boss over the education and parts of it. So what we get and what the legislature puts before her signing the law is what we get. We can't supersede that. I can't teach something that they may teach in other parts. I was asked this by the nominating committee about, do you agree with this or that? I can't do anything outside of what Kay Ivey says I can do. I can't teach regardless. It doesn't matter if it's not state funded. But again, we have the trickle down effect. So what we're doing, and we're doing all over the district, which is something that the parental engagement person has brought into us, is the fact that we're open to explain every test that we give. We're going to show you as much as we can about the results. So this year's the first year these third graders are going to be held accountable for proficiency. I don't know if y'all know that. So this is the holdback year. We had COVID. They passed the law in 2018, and there was a 3-year grace period, or 19, and then COVID hit, and they pushed it back. And then absolutely, it was on the news about 3 weeks ago. Dr. Mack is coming on. Here's the cut score. So these third graders at Sylvania, the ones that are not proficient, unless they have a waiver of some sort, they're held there this time. So what we're trying to do is make sure we have as much opportunity to know what these scores mean, what our reading program gives to support that, and to be able to make it as proficient. Because I'm relating it back to that, because that's where curriculum is focused right now when you get to, because it's tied to law, like it's tied to state law. So when we, and again, to be as transparent as we can, so everybody will know what their child is getting, even though the state says if it's not a science of reading, if it doesn't pass this, then you can't use it. So that's kind of, there's that double-edged sword. But so trickle down effect. So trickle down effect is for sure there. But I think, with our teachers, they want the most number one thing is the proficiency and the best that we can do for our kids in this county. Because I know I've not known any teachers that say, I just come to school and I don't want my kids to be better at reading. That doesn't happen. So
I love reading. It's actually my favorite. You already know, it's my favorite subject of all time. I've got 3 more questions, and I think I'm going to line them up to where they sound pretty good. So what's been your favorite thing since? Actually, we'll go with the other one first. If you had to tell us one positive thing about your opponent in the, I guess you'll call it an opponent, what would you tell us? One positive thing about your opposition in the race. I
think he's done a good job of continuing some of the things that were already laid out for him, and some of the things that were put like facility improvements, the energy improvements that were already in the process of moving. The gyms were in the process of moving forward. The things that had to be done because things were going, energy things that were kind of laid out about 4 years ago are progressing, even though I was just up there with the guys before I came. I was afraid I was going to be late because the guys were needing in our rooms because they redid our windows, of just keeping the ship afloat when Dr. Barnett left. So those things have moved on nicely. So
Awesome. Okay, cool. And then what's been your favorite thing? One of your favorite things? What's been some of the big positives since this whole process started? What's been some of the highlights for you in this thing?
I'm not introvert, extrovert. I have two parts to me. I have the work person and the after work person. So when the after work guy comes to talk about work, it's been the hardest thing, but it's also been the best thing for me, because normally I would just kind of pull in my shell and, think about the day or whatever. I have to go out and chose to go out and listen to issues about whatever. And that has been something that I did not think that I would enjoy, but enjoy hearing people like the gentleman about the 88 and the 82's test score. I mean, that's an awesome question.
Awesome
And I still get a little in knots when I start going to the places to talk about, real life stuff for schools. It's not something, because you do get the parent mentality of the circle of wagon, school circle of wagon. And that's just kind of the mode we get into sometimes. If you get criticized, or if a school gets criticized, everybody wants to shut the doors, keep everybody out and things like that. But just know this, there's not a lot of going to get accomplished if you just circle the wagons and close out parents that don't know about the Reading Act or don't know about this. So going back to that, that's been an eye opener for me about how much I would enjoy getting out talking to people about things that are very serious in nature. So, and going out and just meeting people, that's been awesome.
Awesome.
It's been a good bit.
Third and final question: who's the most handsome interviewer that you've had? I'm kidding. Kidding. On a serious note, on a very serious note, you've got the floor now. This is your time to shine. All that. This is your spotlight on that. Why Heath Kirby? Why should people vote for Heath Kirby for superintendent, and when is that done? But more importantly, why?
I'm going to go back to when we started. I tried to allude to it a little bit earlier about my experience in county school system, my experience being an administrator in Dekalb County, and my experience being in an education family my whole life. I always go back to this statement, and I get a little emotional a little bit, but not today, because this has been great, guys. It's been awesome.
Thank you.
My grandmother caught the bus. I say caught the bus. She couldn't drive, so this was in the 50s. So she caught a bus, and I have a bus driving license I've had for 28 years, and that's something that bus drivers and cafeteria workers and custodians need like a gold medal. If you do that job, you understand. So, so my grandmother caught that bus going to work in the lunchroom at Valley Head. So that's how long that I have been dealing or been in a school system. And I just think that's what makes me unique. My parents, my dad was the first one to graduate college at Troy State. That's where my parents met. And then my stepmom was an educator from Auburn, and it's just led into this. So I really think the uniqueness of me having that experience and knowing what the nuances of DeKalb County really gives me the opportunity. And the one DeKalb kind of says it all for me is the fact that we want all aspects of everybody to be included. Schools are different. Funding's different. Every school gets more or less, but I think that we should all at least have some sort of where we're all the same with facilities and gyms and, down the board. But like I said, I think that's what makes me a little different. So,
man, I really appreciate the time. People can say anything that they want to about you. That's how politics work. That's how all that works. People are going to talk. One thing I don't think anyone should be able to say at all is call you a coward. It was hard to come on here. You did. Yeah. You took all that. You took everything. You swung at everything.
Well, I'm not going to say that I didn't say what I got myself into. I didn't say that out loud, but I may have thought it a little bit. But I'm going to say this: the hospitality that you guys have shown me here, and getting to see your kids running around in here, that's pretty awesome too. And they're so well minded because they're not. I can't hear anything. So I just really appreciate that. And the call part, I was just to be honest with you. I mean, but I get that every day.
That's
I
cool,
do
man.
get that every day. So that's not anything new, but I appreciate y'all inviting me on.
Heck yes, brother. I appreciate the time so much. Good luck moving forward. When do people vote?
It's March 5th. It will be when the presidential primary, that everybody thinks like next November or is it this November? Nope, it's not this November. It'll be March the 5th. And everybody needs to get out and vote because that's a big deal. Presidential primary. I mean, it's heated up right now, so it should be a big turnout. I'm enjoying the fact that it is, as far as I know right now, that's as far as it's going to go. But you never know. There's the qualifying still wide open. So all I can do is worry about me. So, but that's when it goes down.
I think we should set up a debate, a head-to-head debate at some point. I would love to handle that. I'd love to have a part of that. I'd be great at that. Kidding. I'm not kidding. Good luck to you moving forward. Thank you so much for the
Hey,
time, man.
appreciate you, fellas.
Thank y'all for tuning in. Share it around. Let's get some talking going. I appreciate y'all. Have a great day. God bless you.